My son forgot to end the call after our conversation. I heard him and his wife laughing at my expense. He's too blind to see and too naive to understand. Those words struck me like a physical blow. I calmly disconnected the call and drove to my bank. A month later, I served him with a lawsuit and said, "I'll see you in court." He was terrified, knowing it was the end for him, but he had no idea that my real plan was only just beginning. "Thanks for the help, Dad. I'll get it back to you next month, I swear." Michael's voice had that familiar, strained quality I'd gotten used to over the years. Another unexpected problem, another expense he couldn't handle on his warehouse workers' pay. "Don't you worry about it, son. Family looks after family." I meant it, just as I had the dozens of times before. The phone was warm against my ear as I leaned back in my kitchen chair, watching the late afternoon sun stream through the blinds. "All right, well, I have to run. Love you, Dad." "Love you too, Michael." I waited for the usual click, but it never came. Instead, I heard the soft sound of the phone being placed on a counter, followed by retreating footsteps. Michael had forgotten to hang up. I was about to disconnect myself when I heard Jessica's voice, sharp and inquisitive. "Did he notice the ATM withdrawals this time?" My hand froze over the phone. ATM withdrawals? Michael's laugh came through the speaker, cold and filled with mockery. "He's too blind to notice that and too dumb to figure it out even if he did." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. "How much did you get this week?" Jessica's voice again, as casual as if she were asking about the weather. $3,000. Easy." The old man's pin was ridiculously easy to guess. I mean, who uses their wedding date? Michael's voice faded as he moved through their apartment. He's been such an easy target for all these years. A cold dread settled deep in my chest. My wedding date. The day I married Michael's mother, Emily. The date I had shared with him when he was 12, telling him it was the happiest day of my life. Quietly, carefully, I ended the call. My hands were shaking as I opened my banking app. And there it was, plain as day. ATM withdrawal, $3,000. 3 days before that, another for $2,500. Last week, $4,000. The pattern went back for months, maybe even longer. How could I have been so blind? I scrolled through transaction after transaction, each one feeling like another twist of a knife. The money I'd spent 40 years of my life saving. The nest egg I'd built by skipping vacations, buying store-brand groceries, and driving the same pickup for 15 years, all to ensure Michael would have everything he needed. His college tuition after Emily passed, help with his wedding, a contribution to the down payment on their apartment. I remembered sitting in my empty house after Emily's funeral, looking at Michael's acceptance letter to the University of Colorado. The tuition was $32,000 a year. I liquidated half of my retirement savings without a second thought. It's for Michael's future, I told myself. Emily would want this. Now I was sitting in that same kitchen, staring at my phone screen, watching my life's work vanish, $3,000 at a time. My chest burned with an emotion I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't the grief that had consumed me after Emily's death, nor the loneliness of being a widower. This was pure, crystal-clear rage. I put the phone down and walked to the window. Across the street, my neighbor was watering his flowers. The normal sounds of a suburban evening went on as if my world hadn't just been torn apart. Michael thought I was too blind to notice, too dumb to figure it out. I looked at my reflection in the glass. 65 years old, gray-haired, wearing the same old comfortable sweater I'd owned for a decade. Maybe I did look like an easy mark. Maybe I had been one. But not anymore. I picked up my phone again, scrolling through my contacts until I found the number I needed. Tomorrow, I was going to get answers. I needed to know exactly how my son had gotten my PIN, how long this had been happening, and most importantly, how to make sure it never happened again. A plan was already forming in my mind as I sat there in the encroaching darkness. Michael thought he was so clever, so much smarter than his old man. He was about to find out just how wrong he was. The morning coffee tasted bitter, but it helped me focus. I had spent the night strategizing, and now I needed information. Changing my PIN right away would alert Michael that I was on to him, and I wasn't ready for that confrontation just yet. First, I had to understand exactly how he had figured out my code. I dressed with care, choosing an outfit that would help me blend in at my destination. The Rusty Mug Saloon was a dimly lit place in downtown Denver where Michael's best friend, Chris, worked as a bartender. If anyone knew the specifics of Michael's scheme, it would be him. The drive took 20 minutes through streets I knew by heart. I had lived in this city my entire adult life, raised Michael here and buried Emily in Fairmount Cemetery, just 10 miles from where I was now parking. The irony was not lost on me that I was about to use these same familiar places to investigate my own son. The saloon's neon sign flickered like an unsteady pulse. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of burgers and stale beer. It was barely noon, but a few regulars were already perched on stools at the long wooden bar. I picked a seat at the far end, away from the others. Chris looked up from cleaning glasses, his face lighting up with recognition. "Mr. Davis, haven't seen you in here in ages. How've you been?" "Getting by, Chris. Just thought I'd stop in for a quick drink." I settled onto the stool, trying to look relaxed. "Bourbon. Neat." He poured it with practiced skill, the amber liquid glinting under the bar lights. "Michael mentioned you've been helping them out a lot lately. That's really good of you. Family is important." I took a sip, letting the warmth spread through my chest. "Speaking of, how is Michael managing his finances these days? He seems less worried about money." Chris's expression changed slightly, a flicker of what might have been unease. "Yeah, he's been more relaxed about that. Says he figured out a system." "A system?" I kept my voice casual, feigning mild curiosity. "Sounds like Michael. Always was good with numbers." "Well, you know how it is with bank stuff," Chris said, wiping down the bar with more force than necessary. "People find ways to make things work." I leaned in a little, lowering my voice as if sharing a secret. "Between you and me, I've been having trouble with my own banking lately. Keep forgetting my PIN. How do you young guys remember all these numbers?" Chris relaxed, seeming relieved to be on safer ground. "Oh man, it's the worst. I just use my birthday, but Michael always said that's too obvious. He uses dates that are meaningful to him, you know? Like, he told me he cracked his dad's PIN by trying important family dates." My heart pounded against my ribs, but I kept my face neutral. "Smart kid. What kind of dates?" "Well, he said he tried your birthday first, then his mom's, then—" Chris paused as if realizing he might be saying too much. "I probably shouldn't be talking about this." "Oh, don't worry. I'm just impressed he remembered all those dates." I raised my glass in a mock toast. To good memories. The memory hit me with the force of a physical blow. Michael, 12 years old, sitting on our back porch after Emily's funeral, tears rolling down his cheeks. "Tell me about the day you married Mom," he had whispered. "Tell me about when you were happy." I had sat next to him, my own grief a raw, open wound, and told him everything. How Emily looked walking down the aisle. How my hands trembled when I put the ring on her finger. How we danced to At Last, as husband and wife. June 5th, 1985. The date I had chosen as my PIN 15 years later when the bank required a 4-digit code. "Yeah," Chris continued, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. "He said it was your wedding anniversary. Pretty romantic that you still use that as your PIN after all these years." I finished my bourbon in one burning swallow. "Well, you know what they say about old habits." I placed a 20 on the bar. "Keep the change, Chris. And maybe let's keep this conversation between us. Michael might be embarrassed that he's been talking about family finances." "Of course, Mr. Davis. No problem at all." I walked out of the saloon on unsteady legs, the cool spring air feeling like a slap. In my truck, I sat gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white again. The wedding date. My most cherished memory had become the key to my son's betrayal. I started the engine and pulled into traffic, heading toward Michael's apartment. It was time for a conversation, but not the one he was expecting. As I drove through the familiar streets, I rehearsed the words I would say. Michael thought he was so clever, using my love for his mother against me. He was about to find out that some memories were worth fighting for. The steering wheel dug into my palms as I pulled up to Michael's apartment. Chris's words echoed in my head. He said it was your wedding anniversary. The modest duplex stood before me, its patchy lawn a stark contrast to my carefully manicured yard. I had helped with the down payment on this place 3 years ago. I knocked firmly. 3 measured raps. Michael opened the door, wearing sweatpants and a stained t-shirt, his hair a mess as if he'd just woken up at 2 in the afternoon. His expression shifted from confusion to a forced smile. "Dad? What are you doing here?" "I know everything," I said, my voice steady and controlled. "Give me back my money." His mouth opened, then snapped shut. "What money?" "Dad, I don't know what you're talking about." I pulled the folded bank statements from my jacket pocket, the paper crackling like an accusation. These withdrawals, my PIN, my wedding date. The color drained from his face. He took a step back, leaving the door open between us like a barrier. That's impossible. I would never... June 5th, 1985. I read the numbers aloud like a judge delivering a verdict. The day I married your mother. The date you've been using to steal from me. Who told you that? His voice cracked, the facade crumbling. Does it matter? I stepped inside uninvited and scanned the living room. New furniture, a massive flat-screen TV on the wall, all bought with my money, my memories. Michael's jaw tightened. Fine. Yes, I took some money. But it's not stealing when it's family. Some money? I unfolded the statements completely. $37,000 over 8 months. Jessica appeared from the kitchen, her voice sharp. Michael, what's going on? Your father-in-law knows about our PIN arrangement. Arrangement? The word tasted like poison. Is that what we're calling theft now? Jessica crossed her arms, her posture defiant. You have more money than you know what to do with, sitting all alone in that big house. At least Michael put it to good use. The memory hit me without warning. Michael's wedding day, 4 years ago. I had stood watching him dance with Jessica, remembering my own first dance with Emily. Later that night, I'd written them a check for $10,000 as a wedding gift. Money I'd saved by eating dinner alone, night after night, in a house that felt far too quiet, without Emily's laughter. Good use? I looked around the room again. Like that television? Those leather recliners? Michael's shoulders squared, defiance replacing his shame. You should be grateful it was me and not some stranger. At least the money stayed in the family. Grateful? I repeated the word, as if tasting something foul. Look, Dad, you're getting worked up over nothing. It's not like you need the money. What are you going to do with it anyway? Buy another sweater? Jessica laughed, a harsh sound that cut through the tension. He probably doesn't even remember giving us the PIN in the first place. I hadn't given them anything. That PIN was private, sacred. It represented the only day in my life when everything had been perfect, when Emily had walked toward me in a white dress and promised me forever. They had taken that memory and turned it into a tool for their own greed. I want every penny back, I said, my voice level and controlled. By next week. Michael scoffed. Or what? You'll call the cops on your own son? The challenge hung in the air between us. I folded the bank statements carefully, deliberately tucking them back into my pocket. We'll see. I turned and walked to the door, each step measured and purposeful. Behind me, I heard Jessica whisper something sharp to Michael and his muttered reply. The door closed behind me with a definitive click. In my truck, I sat for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles were white. The engine hummed as I pulled away from the curb, my thoughts churning like a storm. Michael thought this was over. He thought I'd go home, defeated and embarrassed, like some senile old fool who'd been put in his place. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. The door closed behind me, and the quiet house amplified the echo of Michael's defiance. I hung my jacket on its familiar hook, the empty hallway stretching before me like a reminder of all the solitary dinners and lonely holidays since Emily died. I went to the kitchen and put the kettle on. The withdrawal printouts lay spread across the counter, each transaction a small, painful betrayal. Maybe I should just let it go. $37,000 was a lot of money, but I had enough to live on. Maybe Michael was right. What was I going to do with it anyway? The kettle's whistle pierced the silence. I poured the hot water over a teabag, watching the amber color spread through the mug like regret. But as I stirred, a different memory surfaced. Michael's sophomore year at CU. He had called me in a panic, saying he needed $5,000 immediately for books and lab fees. I'd driven to the bank that same day and withdrawn the money from my vacation fund. Emily and I had been planning a trip to Ireland before she got sick. We never made it. I set the spoon down with more force than necessary. 3 years later, Michael's car had broken down. Another emergency, another withdrawal from my dwindling retirement savings. Then his wedding, his apartment deposit, the credit card debt from the failed business he'd started and abandoned within 6 months. I walked into the living room, where our family photos lined the mantel. Emily smiled back at me from our honeymoon picture, her face radiant. Next to it was Michael's college graduation photo, the one where he'd thrown his cap in the air while I stood proudly in the background. I had sacrificed everything for that moment. My dreams, my retirement, my chance to travel while I was still young enough to enjoy it. All so Michael could have opportunities I'd never had. You should be grateful it was me and not some stranger. His words replayed in my mind as I traced Emily's face in the photograph. She had been the one who insisted we start a college fund when Michael was born. He deserves every opportunity, she'd said, counting out bills from her teacher's salary. Even then, she had been thinking of his future. I picked up our wedding photo, feeling the weight of the silver frame. June 5th, 1985. The happiest day of my life, reduced to a 4-digit code for my son's convenience. The anger hit me like a physical force. Not the hot, impulsive rage from before, but something colder, more calculated. I set the photo down carefully, deliberately. Calling the police crossed my mind briefly. Bank fraud was a felony. But Michael was right about one thing. I couldn't do that to my own son. However, there were other ways to handle theft. Legal ways that didn't involve criminal charges. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, each step feeling purposeful. In the bathroom, I brushed my teeth while staring at my reflection. 65 years old, gray-haired, wearing the same comfortable sweater Michael had mocked. Maybe I did look like an easy mark, but looks could be deceiving. I turned off the lights and got into bed, the sheets cool against my skin. Outside, the neighborhood settled into its nightly quiet. Normal families finishing normal dinners, having normal conversations about normal problems. My problems were far from normal now. As I lay there in the dark, a plan began to take shape. This wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. There was a difference, and I intended to make Michael understand exactly what that difference was. The digital clock on my nightstand glowed red. 11:47 p.m. Tomorrow was Friday. The courthouse would be open. I would need to make some calls and do some research. 40 years as an engineer had taught me the value of preparation and precision. I closed my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. My mind raced with possibilities, strategies, the careful steps I'd need to take. Michael thought he was smart, thought he'd outsmarted his foolish old father. Tomorrow I would begin to teach him just how smart this old man could be. Sunlight filtered through the blinds as I got up, the plan from the night before sharp in my mind, like a blueprint finely drawn to scale. I had slept better than I expected. The decision had brought a strange sense of peace. By 7 a.m. I was dressed in my best suit, the navy one I had worn to Emily's funeral, pressed and dignified. The drive to First National Bank took 15 minutes through the quiet morning streets. I parked deliberately close to the entrance, clutching a manila folder thick with printed bank statements, transaction records, and notes I had compiled during my sleepless night. The bank lobby was buzzing with the fluorescent energy of early customers. I walked up to the customer service desk, where a young woman with perfectly styled hair greeted me with a practiced smile. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" "I need to report unauthorized use of my debit card." I placed the folder on her desk with deliberate weight. Multiple withdrawals over several months. Fraud. Her smile faltered slightly. "Oh my. Let me get our security manager for you right away." Within minutes, I was sitting across from Daniel Carter, a middle-aged man whose tie was slightly crooked despite the early hour. He opened my folder, his expression growing more serious with each page. "Mr. Davis, these are substantial amounts. You're saying you didn't authorize any of these ATM withdrawals?" "Not a single one," I said, leaning forward. "Someone has been using my PIN for months. I have reason to believe it's a family member." His pen hovered over a yellow legal pad. "A family member?" "My son has access to my personal information. He knows significant dates in my life." I pointed to the withdrawal pattern. "Notice the amounts never exceed $5,000, staying under the reporting thresholds." Carter nodded grimly. "That's unfortunately common in family fraud cases. We'll need to start an investigation immediately." A memory surfaced without warning. Michael at 16 asking to borrow my truck. I'd handed him the keys along with my wallet, trusting him completely to get gas and come right back. He had been responsible then, careful with my trust. "What's your process?" I asked. "We'll pull the security footage from the ATMs used and cross-reference it with the timestamps on your statements. If we can identify the person making the withdrawals..." He paused delicately. "Will you press charges if it's confirmed to be your son?" The question hung between us. "I want my money returned. How that happens depends on how cooperative he chooses to be." Over the next 3 days I kept to my usual routine while the bank conducted its investigation. I mowed the lawn with mechanical precision, reorganized my workshop, and cleaned gutters that didn't need cleaning. But beneath the ordinary tasks, a sense of anticipation hummed like an electric current. On Wednesday afternoon, Carter called. "Mr. Davis, we've reviewed the ATM footage. The person making the withdrawals matches the description you provided of your son. We've contacted him directly to discuss the matter." "And?" "He initially denied any wrongdoing, but when we presented him with the video evidence..." Carter cleared his throat. He became quite agitated, said this was a family matter and the bank had no business interfering. I gripped the phone tighter. "What's your next step?" "We're required to give him an opportunity to explain or make restitution before pursuing formal charges. But Mr. Davis, I should warn you, he seemed very upset about our involvement." After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen, staring at my reflection in the dark window. The bank had done exactly what I'd hoped. Now Michael knew his theft had been discovered through official channels, not just his father's suspicions. I spent the evening reviewing my notes, anticipating his response. Michael had always been impulsive when cornered, quick to lash out rather than accept responsibility. Emily used to call it his cornered cat behavior, all claws and fury when he felt trapped. As I sat down with my evening coffee, my phone vibrated insistently on the counter. The screen lit up with a name I had been expecting but dreading: Michael. The device continued its urgent buzzing, demanding my attention like an accusation that refused to be ignored. I stared at it for 3 full rings, knowing that whatever came next would set the course for everything that followed. The insistent ringing pulled me from my chair, the screen confirming what I dreaded. I took a measured breath before answering, my voice steady despite the storm I knew was coming. "Hello, Michael." "What the hell did you do?" His voice exploded through the speaker, raw with fury. "The bank called me. They're accusing me of fraud." "I reported unauthorized withdrawals from my account. The bank is doing its job." "Unauthorized? I'm your son. It's family money." I remained silent, letting his words hang in the air like smoke. "Dad, are you there? Say something." "I'm listening." The phone rustled, and I could hear urgent whispering in the background. Then Jessica's voice cut through, sharp as broken glass. "Mr. Davis, this is disgusting behavior. Is this how you show love for your family?" "Jessica." "No, let me talk." Her voice had that particular edge she used when she wanted to wound. "Michael has given you everything. His time, his attention, his respect. And this is how you repay him? By humiliating him with bank investigators?" I had heard this tone before. Last Christmas, when I'd bought Michael a modest gift instead of the expensive watch he'd been hinting at for months. The same wounded indignation, the same twisted logic that framed my restraint as cruelty. "I want my money returned," I stated calmly. Michael's voice returned, breathless with rage. "Your money? Dad, you're going to die someday, and who do you think gets everything anyway? I was just getting an advance." "An advance requires permission." "Permission?" He laughed, a bitter, harsh sound. "You want permission? Fine. Here's some permission for you. Stop this investigation or you're going to regret it." The threat settled between us like ice. "Regret it how, exactly?" "You think you're so smart sitting in that big house all alone, but you need us more than we need you, old man. How often do we visit? How often do we call just to check on you?" Jessica chimed in again, her voice syrupy with false concern. "We're all the family you have left, Mr. Davis. Do you really want to throw that away over money? What would Emily think?" The mention of my wife's name hit like a physical blow. I closed my eyes, remembering Emily's gentle voice telling Michael bedtime stories, her patient hands teaching him how to tie his shoes. Emily would want honesty between family members. "Honesty?" Michael's voice cracked with disbelief. "You want honesty? Here's some honesty. You're a lonely old man who buys his family's attention with money, and now you're angry because someone finally called you on it." I moved to the window, looking out at the quiet street where normal families lived normal lives, without these kinds of conversations. The bank will complete their investigation regardless of what I say now. The process has started. Then stop it. Call them back. "I can't do that, Michael." "Can't or won't?" "Won't." Silence stretched between us, filled only by his breathing and the distant sound of traffic. "Fine." His voice dropped to something colder, more calculated. "You want to play this game? We'll play. But don't come crying to us when you realize what you've lost." The line went dead. I set the phone down carefully, methodically, as if disarming a bomb. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the effort of maintaining control through 20 minutes of concentrated venom. I walked to my desk and pulled out a legal pad, writing down everything I could remember from the conversation. Michael's threats, Jessica's manipulations, their exact words about regret and consequences. If this escalated, I wanted documentation. The memory surfaced as I wrote. Michael, at 25, calling me at midnight from a police station. Drunk driving, he'd said, but it was just a misunderstanding. Could I post bail? The officer had been wrong, he insisted. Everyone was wrong except Michael. I'd paid the bail, hired a lawyer, and watched him walk away without a word of thanks. Now, 10 years later, the pattern was unchanged. Everyone was wrong except Michael. I finished my notes and filed them neatly in the manila folder. Outside, the neighborhood settled into its evening rhythm, but I found myself glancing frequently toward the window. Michael's threats had been vague but pointed. I'd learned long ago that cornered animals were unpredictable. As I prepared for bed, a distant siren wailed, growing closer before fading into silence. The sound made me pause at my bedroom window, scanning the empty street below. Everything appeared normal, but something in the darkness felt different now, changed. 2 days passed in a watchful routine. Errands at the grocery store, emails to old colleagues, morning walks around the neighborhood. But beneath the ordinary activities, I felt like prey waiting for a predator to strike. On Thursday morning, a knock on the door shattered the calm, sharp, authoritative raps that echoed through my quiet house like gunshots. I peered through the living room curtains and saw 2 police cruisers in my driveway, their red and blue lights painting my white garage door in flashing colors. 3 officers stood on my porch, one holding an official-looking document. I opened the door with steady hands. Mr. Robert Davis? That's me. The lead officer, a woman in her 40s with steel-gray eyes, unfolded a paper with practiced precision. We have a search warrant for these premises based on an anonymous tip regarding illegal weapon storage. The words hit me like cold water. Weapons? Officer, I've never owned a gun in my life. There's been some mistake. We'll need to conduct a thorough search to verify that, sir. May we come in? I stepped aside, my mind racing, an anonymous tip. The timing was too convenient, too perfectly vindictive. Michael's voice echoed in my memory. You're going to regret it. Within minutes, my home was chaos. Drawers were pulled open, couch cushions overturned, kitchen cabinets emptied onto the counters. I followed them from room to room, watching 40 years of careful organization crumble under their methodical invasion. Sir, you'll need to wait outside while we complete the search. On my own front lawn, I stood like a defendant. Neighbors emerged from their houses, phones raised, recording my humiliation. Mrs. Henderson from next door whispered urgently to her husband. Their words were lost in the morning air, but their judgment was clear. A memory surfaced, unbidden. Michael's 21st birthday. I'd surprised him with a weekend trip to Chicago, paid for entirely, with money I'd saved by eating lunch at home instead of at restaurants. We toured the architecture, visited museums, and shared deep dish pizza. He'd hugged me at the train station and said it was the best birthday ever. Mr. Davis, the lead officer reappeared. We've completed our search. No weapons were found on the premises. Because I don't own any. The tip mentioned specific locations, basement storage, bedroom closets. We found nothing to substantiate the claim. Her voice held a note of apology, but her eyes remained professional. We'll file our report accordingly. They departed as efficiently as they'd arrived, leaving behind overturned furniture and violated spaces. I watched their taillights disappear around the corner, then turned back toward my house. The front door stood open like a mouth frozen mid-scream. The door clicked shut behind me, the scattered papers crunching under my feet as shock settled into something harder, more focused. Books lay spine up on the floor, their pages splayed like broken wings. Kitchen drawers hung open, their contents spilled across the counters in accusatory piles. I walked to my study, where the computer still hummed quietly. The Facebook icon glowed blue in the corner of the screen, a platform I'd avoided for years, preferring phone calls to public declarations. But Michael's actions had changed the rules. I logged into the account I had created but never used, my fingers moving slowly across the keyboard. Emily had set it up for me before she died, insisting I'd want to see photos of future grandchildren. There were no grandchildren now, only betrayal. I navigated to Jessica's profile, her smiling face mocking me from a vacation photo I'd unknowingly funded. The latest post was pinned at the top, uploaded 2 hours ago, a video, the search. My humiliation, captured in high definition. Unfortunately, my father-in-law has taken a wrong path, the caption read. We're heartbroken, but not surprised. Mental decline affects many elderly people, leading to paranoid delusions and accusations against family members. Please keep him in your thoughts and prayers. Family first. Mental health awareness. The video showed police cars in my driveway, officers carrying boxes, neighbors gathering like vultures. 47 likes, 16 shares. The comments flowed like poison. So sad when they get like this. My grandmother did the same thing before we had to move her to assisted living. You're such a saint for putting up with this, Jessica. I slammed the laptop shut, my hands trembling with rage. The phone rang. My bank. Mr. Davis, this is Daniel Carter from Fraud Investigation. I wanted to update you on your case. What's the status? Well, it's taking longer than expected. These family matters are complicated. We've spoken with your son again, and he's maintaining his position that the withdrawals were authorized. Authorized? My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. I told you they weren't. Yes, but without additional evidence or a criminal complaint, our options are limited. We can freeze the account, but recovering funds already withdrawn. He trailed off diplomatically. What you're telling me is that you won't help. We're doing everything we can within our guidelines, Mr. Davis. Perhaps this is something better resolved within the family. I hung up without another word. The laptop sat on my desk, Jessica's lies still glowing behind the dark screen. 47 people now believed I was a mentally declining old man making paranoid accusations against my loving family. I opened the laptop again, stared at the post, and made a decision. If they wanted to play in public, we would play in public. But this time, I would control the narrative. I pulled out a legal pad and began writing. Not angry words or emotional pleas, but a methodical plan. 40 years as an engineer had taught me that every problem has a solution if you approach it with the right tools and sufficient patience. Michael thought he was smart. Jessica believed she was clever. They were about to discover the difference between cunning and intelligence. The screen dimmed as I pushed back from the desk, but an idea had sparked. It was time to turn the tables, quietly. I had spent my career solving complex problems by breaking them down into manageable parts, and this situation was no different. Michael and Jessica had declared war using lies and manipulation. I would respond with truth and evidence. First step, documentation. I downloaded a call recording app onto my phone, the kind divorce lawyers recommend to their clients. Every future conversation with Michael would be preserved, his own words captured for posterity. Second step, professional help. I found a private investigator, Frank Miller, through an online search. His ad promised discreet investigations for sensitive matters. His office was on the second floor of a shabby downtown building, the kind of place people go when they have nowhere else to turn. $37,000 over 8 months, I explained, sliding the bank statements across his cluttered desk. I need to know what they spent it on. Miller was younger than I expected, maybe 45, with intelligent eyes and hands that moved constantly. Surveillance isn't cheap, Mr. Davis. My daily rate is $300 plus expenses. How long would you need for this amount of theft? 2 weeks should give us a clear picture of their lifestyle. As I wrote the check, a memory surfaced. Designing the water treatment facility in 1987, the mayor asking if we could cut corners to save money. Good engineering isn't cheap, I told him, but it's cheaper than fixing bad engineering later. The same principle applied now. Within a week, Miller delivered his first report. Michael and Jessica's spending painted a picture of casual extravagance, designer clothing, expensive restaurants, weekend trips to luxury resorts. The photos showed them laughing over champagne at places I had never heard of, wearing watches that cost more than most people's cars. My money had funded their performance of prosperity. But Miller's most interesting discovery wasn't photographic, it was technological. Your son's been bragging about his inheritance advance on social media, he explained, showing me screenshots from Michael's Instagram. One was posted last week. The image showed Michael raising a glass and a toast with the caption, "To family money, well spent. Some people know how to enjoy life. Living, my best life. To family wealth." I stared at the screen, my jaw clenching. He wasn't just stealing from me. He was mocking me publicly while doing it. Third step, the trap. I created a fake email account and sent myself a fabricated bank alert about suspicious activity. Then I called Michael, my phone quietly recording every word. "Dad, what's wrong? You sound upset." "I just got an alert from the bank. They're flagging unusual withdrawal patterns on my account." Silence. Then, "What kind of patterns?" "Large amounts, always just under $5,000. They want me to come in tomorrow to review the security footage." "Security footage?" His voice cracked slightly. "From the ATMs. They can see who's been using my card." More silence. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a note of panic I had never heard before. "Dad, maybe you should wait. Don't go to the bank tomorrow. Let me call you back." The line went dead. I set the phone down and smiled for the first time in weeks. My engineering days had taught me that pressure reveals structural weaknesses. Michael had just shown me his. But my plan was only just beginning. Miller had given me evidence of their extravagance. My recordings would capture their admissions. The fake email had confirmed their guilt through their panic. Now came the most important component: legal action. I picked up the phone and dialed the number I had found online earlier that day. "Evans and Reed Law, how may I help you?" "I'd like to schedule a consultation. I need to sue my son." The stack of photos was aligned neatly in my folder, each image a piece of evidence in the case I was building. Miller's surveillance had been thorough. Michael and Jessica dining at restaurants that charged more for a bottle of wine than I spent on groceries in a month, shopping at boutiques where a single handbag cost more than my monthly utilities. The law office of Evans and Reed occupied a renovated Victorian house near downtown, its brass nameplate polished to a mirror shine. Attorney Laura Evans was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, but her questions were sharp and focused. "Mr. Davis, you're certain you want to proceed with this? Suing family members creates permanent damage." "The damage was done when my son decided to steal from me." She reviewed my evidence methodically. The bank statements, Miller's photographs, the recorded phone conversations where Michael's guilt seeped through his panic. "This is actually quite strong. The recordings are admissible since you were a party to the conversations, and the financial evidence is clear." "What are we looking at for damages?" "Theft of $37,000 plus interest, court costs, and potentially punitive damages for the systematic nature of the fraud." Her pen scratched across legal forms, each stroke sealing my path forward. "I'll file this afternoon." The courthouse clerk stamped my documents with a satisfying thud, the official seal marking my transformation from victim to plaintiff. Case number, CV 2024-1847, Robert Davis versus Michael Davis and Jessica Davis. I was heading home when my phone rang. Michael. I activated the recording app before answering. "Dad, we need to talk. Can you drop this bank thing? We can work something out." "Work what out, exactly?" "Look, maybe I did borrow some money without asking, but families don't sue each other over misunderstandings." "Borrowing requires permission, Michael. Taking without permission is theft." Jessica's voice cut in from the background. "Tell him we'll pay him back. Slowly, but we'll pay." "How slowly?" I asked. "Maybe $50 a month, $100. We're not rich, Dad." I thought of the photos Miller had taken yesterday. Michael signing the check at a steakhouse that charged $60 for a ribeye. "You'll be hearing from my attorney." "Your attorney?" His voice pitched higher. "Dad, you can't be serious about this. I'm your son. And I was your father. Neither fact prevented the theft. We'll fight this. We'll tell everyone you're having mental problems. The police search proves—" I hung up, my fingers steady on the end call button. The irony wasn't lost on me. Years ago, when Michael was 12, he'd been caught stealing candy from a corner store. I had marched him back to apologize and pay double the candy's value. "Taking what isn't yours is wrong," I'd told him, "no matter what excuse you use." He'd learned the lesson then. Apparently, he'd forgotten it. That evening, I sat in my study reviewing the legal papers Laura Evans had prepared. The complaint laid out the facts in cold, precise language: systematic theft, abuse of trust, fraudulent use of financial information. Reading it felt like watching my family's destruction narrated by a stranger. But some destruction is necessary, like demolishing a building with structural damage. You have to clear the bad foundation before you can build something better. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is just the beginning, old man. You have no idea what you've started." I forwarded the text to Evans with a note. Additional evidence of intimidation. Then I poured myself a glass of the wine Emily and I had been saving for a special occasion. It had been aging in our basement for 15 years, waiting for the right moment. Tonight felt right. Justice, it turned out, was worth celebrating. That month flew by in a blur of rehearsals and legal reviews, meetings with Evans, practice sessions for my testimony, organizing evidence, until I was finally stepping into the echoing hall of the courthouse. The weight of my carefully compiled evidence anchored me with a quiet confidence. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, more like a conference room with elevated seating and formal furniture. Michael and Jessica sat at the defendant's table with their court-appointed attorney, a young man who looked overwhelmed by the stacks of evidence against his clients. Judge Eleanor Vance called the session to order with a sharp crack of her gavel. "This is a civil case of alleged theft and fraud. Mr. Davis, you may present your evidence." Evans stood, her voice clear and professional. "Your Honor, we will demonstrate a systematic theft totaling $37,000, accomplished through the unauthorized use of the plaintiff's personal identification number." The first exhibit was the bank statements, each withdrawal highlighted in yellow. As Evans read the amounts aloud, I watched Michael's face grow paler with each number. March 3rd, $3,000. March 10th, $2,500. March 17th, $4,000. The list continued for several minutes, a drumbeat of betrayal measured in dollars and dates. Then came Miller's photographs, projected onto a screen for the judge to see. Michael and Jessica at expensive restaurants, shopping at luxury stores, Michael wearing a watch that cost more than my truck payment. "These photos were taken during the period of the alleged theft," Evans explained. "Note that the defendant's lifestyle appears inconsistent with their reported income." But the moment I had been waiting for came when Evans played the recording from my phone. Michael's voice filled the courtroom, his panic clear as he begged me to avoid the bank's investigation. "Dad, maybe you should wait. Don't go to the bank tomorrow. Let me call you back." The recording continued with our later conversation. "Look, maybe I did borrow some money without asking." Judge Vance leaned forward. "Did I hear the defendant admit to taking money without permission?" Michael's attorney objected weakly, but the damage was done. Michael had confessed in his own words. When it was their turn, Michael took the stand with shaking hands. "Your Honor, my father gave me permission to use his account. He's getting older. Sometimes he forgets things." "Do you have any written permission?" Evans asked during cross-examination. "Well, no, but—" "Any witnesses to this alleged permission?" "It was understood between us. Family doesn't need formal permission for everything." Evans then pulled out the social media screenshots. "Is this your Instagram post, Mr. White?" Michael's face turned ashen as his own words appeared on the screen. "To family money, well spent. Some people know how to enjoy life." "Does this sound like someone who believed he had permission?" That was just a joke." Jessica's testimony was even worse. She cried on cue, claiming they had only taken money for necessities, while photos of their luxury purchases glowed on the screen behind her. "Groceries cost $1,800 at a steakhouse?" Evans asked dryly. As I watched them squirm, I remembered the morning I'd overheard Michael's laughter through the phone. He's too blind to notice and too dumb to figure it out. The arrogance in his voice, the casual dismissal of my intelligence. Now he sat in a witness chair, stumbling over lies, while evidence of his theft surrounded him like prison walls. Judge Vance deliberated for less than 10 minutes. "I find the evidence overwhelming. The defendant systematically stole from the plaintiff using personal information obtained through family trust. The theft totaled $37,000 over 8 months, accomplished through deliberate deception." The gavel's strike echoed through the courtroom like thunder. Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $37,000 in restitution, plus court costs, attorney's fees, and a penalty of $10,000 for the systematic nature of the fraud. Total judgment, $52,000. I sat perfectly still, letting the victory settle into my bones like warmth from a long-awaited fire. Michael and Jessica stared at the judge in shock, their faces as pale as hospital sheets. $52,000 they didn't have, a judgment they couldn't escape. As we filed out of the courtroom, Michael caught my arm. "Dad, please, we can't pay this. You're destroying us." I looked into his eyes. my son's eyes, Emily's eyes, and saw nothing but the frightened calculation of someone whose schemes had finally collapsed. "You destroyed yourselves," I said quietly. "I just provided the evidence." Outside the courthouse, Evans shook my hand with genuine satisfaction. "Congratulations, Mr. Davis. Now comes the fun part, collecting what they owe you." I walked to my truck with the judgment papers in my briefcase, feeling lighter than I had in months. The spring air carried the scent of flowering trees, and for the first time since that terrible phone call, I could imagine a future without the bitter taste of betrayal. The enforcement notice arrived within a week, its official letterhead announcing the beginning of Michael and Jessica's financial reckoning. My attorney had explained the process: wage garnishment, asset seizure, bank account freezes, the legal machinery that turns court judgments into recovered money. I watched their unraveling from a careful distance. First, Michael's car disappeared. I drove past their apartment complex and saw it parked on the street with a "for sale" sign taped to the windshield, its red letters fading like their excuses. The BMW he had bought with my stolen money was now priced desperately low for a quick sale. 2 days later, Miller called with an update. They're liquidating everything they can. Estate sale this weekend. Furniture, electronics, jewelry. Word is they're behind on rent and facing eviction. How much have they raised? Maybe $8,000 so far. They've got a long way to go. The social media posts had stopped completely. Jessica's Instagram, once filled with restaurant photos and vacation posts, was now silent. Their last public performance had been their courtroom defeat. I received my first payment on a Tuesday, a check for $1,500 drawn on Michael's checking account with "court-ordered payment" written in the memo line. My bank teller processed it without comment, but I caught her glance at the notation. The irony was perfect. Money flowing back to me through the same bank where Michael had tried to convince them I was too senile to notice systematic theft. That afternoon, my phone rang. Jessica. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Mr. Davis, please, can we talk? We know we made mistakes, but $52,000 will ruin us. Michael lost his job because his boss found out about the lawsuit. I'm pregnant, please." Her voice carried genuine desperation now, stripped of the manipulation I'd grown accustomed to. "Jessica, you had months to return what you stole. You chose threats and humiliation instead." "But the baby, your grandchild." The words hung between us like bait. She was trying the same emotional manipulation that had worked for years, assuming I'd sacrifice my dignity for the promise of family peace. "Any child deserves parents who understand the difference between right and wrong. Maybe this experience will teach you both that lesson." I hung up and sat quietly in my kitchen, remembering the morning I had discovered their theft, the shock of betrayal, the humiliation of being called too blind and too dumb to notice my own money disappearing. Now Michael worked construction for half his old wages, his fancy watch sold to a pawn shop. Jessica had moved back in with her mother, their apartment lost to missed rent. The court's judgment had stripped away their stolen prosperity, revealing the emptiness underneath. By the end of summer, they had managed to pay back $23,000 through liquidated assets and garnished wages. The remaining $29,000 would take years to collect, assuming they both stayed employed. I deposited their latest payment, a money order for $800, and drove home through neighborhoods where normal families lived normal lives without these complications. In my driveway, I sat for a moment, looking at the house Emily and I had built together. 40 years of marriage, 30 years of raising Michael, 15 years of widowhood. The phone call that started this journey felt like it belonged to another lifetime. But the silence in the house was different now. Not the hollow echo of loneliness, but the satisfied quiet of problems solved and accounts balanced. I walked inside and pulled out my checkbook to update the register. $52,000 awarded, $23,000 collected, $29,000 still owed. The mathematics of justice, calculated in dollars and consequences. Emily's picture smiled at me from the mantelpiece, her face frozen in wedding day joy. I had honored her memory by refusing to accept theft disguised as family loyalty. She would have approved of the fight, even if she might have grieved the necessity of it. Outside my window, the neighborhood settled into its evening routine. Normal problems, normal solutions, normal families without these complications. Inside my house, the silence felt like victory.